Peace to everyone. Good morning. Happy Sunday. I just had a 3 hour conversation with a friend of mine I've had for like 23 years. Someone I know very well, better than I even realized. Um, I kind of forgot how we used to have long conversations over the phone back in the day. And she called me, let me know that, and I knew this from Facebook. I saw the posts from mutual friends, but our good friend, Guy Spalding, known at Fair as Killian, just passed away recently. And I guess yesterday in San Jose, California, they had a service for him. I'm living 5 hours south, and I just wasn't able to plan, you know, within the time frame to go and do that. And but it was well attended. A lot of fair people were there, and both in the Scottish Renaissance Fair and the English Renaissance Fair. So it's a good dude. Um, Known him, Killian, Kieran, and Orion since the Three Migos, and then mostly it was Killian and Kieran since 2003. And if you needed a drink, they'd give you a swig. Like, these are the guys that, like, they always had something on them. Always. They had some type of alcoholic beverage. Never failed. Okay. Now I don't drink anymore. That was kind of more the real beginning of my social drinking for some years. But I don't drink anymore, and socially or otherwise. And but if I needed to, they always had something. Okay. And yeah, they didn't take themselves too seriously. Um, Killian would wear his like Scottish Renfair attire when he's part of the guild, but then he'd go to Northern Fair, which is in Gilroy, um, Casa de Fruta, okay, Casa de Renfair, as some called it, and he would dress up as a pseudo Viking with these like fur underwear with this like two-horn helmet. It's just so stupid looking, so dumb. But that's the thing. He did not take himself that serious, but he made excellent chainmail necklaces. I wish I had one of those. Holy crap. He was a master at doing chainmail. He even was like going to start a business at some point, but like he made a literal chainmail basket. Now it was all flexible, of course, but he put the time into making that. I mean, this guy was something else, man. He wasn't just some boozer, looking for broads. Um, he made cool stuff, and he was a nice guy. I guess he would. I didn't realize this, but he would go and do like barbecues for local schools and things like that. He was just a nice guy all around. And Killian, I'll miss you, brother. There's some fun times. A lot of us can say that because he was just a cool dude. And in regards to this channel and kind of really what I've been focusing on a lot, and as I'm making one of my igofkas, right, as I'm kind of finishing it up. Yesterday, I still have a little bit more. I plan on finishing it today. I've got a red one I got to finish. I got to really actually, like, I'm probably maybe halfway done with that one. I'm about like 85 to 90% done with this one. It's more like I got to go do some double stitching on it and finish little tassels on the tips, and then it's done. And I'll try it on and everything else and see how it goes. But as I'm doing this stuff right now, I started thinking, like, man, like, what if I wore this stuff at a powwow, right? Powwows are not Muskogee, as I've gone over here before. And, I'm a Muskogee Nation citizen. I've got some Yuchi lineage and also some Cherokee. So we're Southeastern Indians, okay? But if I wore this stuff at a powwow, I'm thinking, okay, cool. Then I thought powwows. I thought Renfair, Killian. I'm just like, all these thoughts are going in my head. And I realized a friend of mine, Trey, shout out to Trey, shared this one image, this meme of like, I think it was like Renfairs, powwows for white people. I'm thinking like, yeah, basically, that's pretty true. So I'm going to talk about that in this video. Now, I can say from my own experience that there's truth to that. I have Scottish and Irish heritage, English, and so like going to Renfair, but never as an Englishman, never as an Irishman, always as a Scot. It's a Highlander, okay? Always kilted. I always took that more seriously. I always took my reenactment more serious. Not that everything I wore was perfectly historically correct. And I'd go shirtless in my kilt too. And at one point, I had the ladies crawling all over me. And when I was like 21, I had a six-pack. I was like in gymnastic condition. I was doing gymnastics. And oh my gosh, I could have got so much tail. It's unbelievable how much I could have got. I just like didn't, partly because I have standards. I don't want to just like, bang chicks that were just banged by somebody else the night before. That's the thing, is that Renfair culture has a lot of that. Is a huge sexual outlet. The day life is what I live for. The day life is the fun reenactment. You can see all the cool artwork. You can watch the arts and crafts. You can watch the fighting. There's all the kid stuff going on, and that's the part that I've always lived for, is the daytime part. But a lot of the people that work there, they live for the nightlife. They have the leather and lace parties. If you catch my drift, that was actually the name of one of the parties. All the adult stuff the bondage type stuff, I'm not into. I've never been into. And so there's a reason I kind of phased out of English Renfair and just started going to the Scottish games more and started getting more into, like being a participant in that reenactment, because there is more of this clan and family aspect to the Scottish Renfair culture. Okay. That's why I stuck around for so long at those festivals. I was part of a couple of guilds there. I started a guild for, about a year and a half, and then kind of said, nah, I'm kind of done with this. It's hard to keep membership. It's hard to really keep something going when you're working, you're running a small leather business. Not that kind of leather, by the way. We're talking like bracelets, book covers, pieces of armor, hair barrettes, all that kind of stuff. I made some cool stuff. Okay. I really did. Okay. And it was called Spoils of War. And yeah, it was definitely, it was fun times. But yeah, I couldn't do that stuff and run a guild and still just go have fun when I'm at fair. So I kind of phased out of having a guild. I kept doing sword, and life just took a different turn over time. I realized that, my jobs sucked and my business was declining, and I had to do something else to make real money. And that's kind of where I got into the trades. And a lot of fun times, but, being a part of the Highlander Warriors reenactment group for so many, like 8 years, it was a clan and family. It really was. And that's the thing about, that aspect of the festivals, is that you could find people that are like that to you for what you're looking for. And I wanted to be a warrior. I wanted to be a swordsman. I wanted to learn Scottish martial arts. I didn't learn Scottish martial arts in my Highlander Wars. I didn't even learn real martial arts at all. But I was doing sword choreography, and it was fun. I got really good at it. And shortly after I joined, I started finding all the HEMA texts and started practicing real Scottish, real Italian, and real German martial arts. Okay. So the kind of stuff that we probably should have been doing as a guild, I was already gearing in that direction, but I still loved the guild and wanted to keep doing it. I had fun. We did theater. It was cool. It was fun. So yeah, I mean, it was definitely an outlet to study and learn, and kind of like gave you an excuse to kind of, in your free time, to just go and study more of this ancestral stuff, right? And so that's kind of what I did for a few years, for quite a few years actually. And rehashing things with this old friend of mine, we're both descendants of King Brian Boru, and she absolutely has been obsessed with that. I could still tell how obsessed she is with that part of her lineage. And I can tell that, unfortunately, she still falls into the category of, following the Morgan Llewellyn books. I read one of those books. Um, Very cool. Not exactly history, though. So you got to be careful with these historical fictions, these historical novels, because there is real history surrounding the events of the book, but the book itself is still a piece of fiction. All right. So also learned that she's kind of going studying to become Jehovah's Witness. There's a few things in that conversation that became pretty obvious to me early on, because I grew up with friends and neighbors that were Jehovah's Witnesses. And so I understand their stuff pretty well in a more positive way. I'm not crapping on them as a people, but I see the good, I see the bad, I see the incorrect, and I see things where I can tell scripturally where they're kind of why they would come to these conclusions, right? As soon as she says, "Oh, I don't do Christmas anymore," oh yeah, all these holidays are bad, I'm going like, oh crap, is she becoming a Jehovah's Witness, right? And then like she goes on about like, oh yeah, I do a memorial every year. I'm going up. I'm like 99.999% sure. And as we start getting further into the conversation, like another hour later, like she's like, oh yeah, I've been studying with the Jehovah's Witnesses. I'm like, okay. I kind of figured at this point, So it's funny. She can be very vivid about details of her personal life, and I realize just really how good of friends we've been over the years, and how open she's been with me about her personal life, if you catch my drift, and she still is. And I'm just going like, yeah. I mean, we've been friends and cousins at this point, this long, that she shared quite a bit with me over the years, and I guess I her as well. And it was a good conversation, but it's just funny. It's funny. I haven't talked to her in like probably 8 years, 9 years, something like that. And then like, here we are. It's just like old times. She hasn't changed hardly, like she has in some ways, but not totally. But back to Pow Wows and Renfair. Okay. So a lot of people, and as a kid who went to Pow Wows as a child with my mom, I thought I was kind of getting in touch with Native culture, and you do, but it's not necessarily my native culture. It's not Muskogee, Cherokee, Yuchi, that's not, I didn't grow up knowing that I had Yuchi blood. I found that out myself. And I've been rightfully claiming it ever since. But I always heard Creek and Cherokee, Muskogee Creek and Cherokee. And so, but that culture doesn't really exist at Pow Wows. Not really. But I did go to Pow Wows way before I did Renfair. Okay. But I wanted to get in touch with the Scottish side as well. And that's kind of, like I said, all the aforementioned events. And also kind of get a little bit in touch with some of the Irish side as well, because I've got a good amount of Irish blood, in my veins. But you have people who, like, they're trying to get so in touch with their ancestral heritage, they want to get into the religious and spiritual traditions. And so it's like you go to an Indian powwow, you're trying to get in touch with, people would say like maybe the Great Spirit. That's a very generic term, by the way. In Muskogee, it's not the Great Spirit. It's the Master of Breath, or the one above all, depending on kind of how you look at some of the cosmology, okay? And depending on if you're going to the churches or doing the traditionalist medicine tradition of traditionalist stomp dance things, right? And I've had to learn all this over the years, over the last couple decades. And it's just, so what you see at the powwows is not what you're going to see at the stomp grounds. Even though they have their own stomp dances and they have intertribal stuff, it's not the same, okay? But people go there trying to find that same thing, okay? And so people will say, "Oh, I'm Cherokee, but I'm adopted Lakota Sioux." It's like, well, what the hell does that mean? You're adopted at a powwow? Like, that's not even the same as being adopted by the actual people on the reservation, right? So there's a bit of weirdness, disconnect in that regard. But, so I've seen people at Renfair, at the Scottish Fair, who fall in this category, who've done native stuff quite a bit and who, maybe even are enrolled citizens of like Cherokee Nation or whatever, and maybe even can speak Cherokee, but look very white and who are heavily mixed, right? But who have legitimate tribal citizenship and but who are integrating all this other stuff, even generic native stuff, into part of their Scottish stuff at the festivals. So anyhow, so you gotta be careful. And that's, here we are like 16 minutes almost into the video, and we're getting to some of the meat and potatoes of what I want to discuss when it comes to powwows for white people. Okay. So you have people that say, oh, I want to worship Druid religion, or I want to worship, the goddess, or whatever, right? So there's this kind of thing going on. So if you haven't heard of Wicca basically means like witchcraft. Like and what it really is, contrary to what it pretends to be, is it's actually a conglomeration of different documented European mythologies. So you'll take Greco-Roman, which tend to get combined anyway by scholars, and maybe rightfully so for the most part. Then you'll have Norse and Celtic, but they'll say, oh, this is all Celtic. They'll take Norse runes and say, oh, yes, but runes are Celtic. Now, you go back to Edward Williams, also known as Iolo Morganwg. You go back to like Welsh history, back in like the days of George Washington, essentially, and slightly after. And what you're dealing with is a guy who did his own kind of reconstructionist paganism. And he had followers, he did build up some kind of movement in Wales that's kind of survived him. But then you also have people that have like tried to take up the mantle overseas, like here in the States, and are, they bought books written by Wicca people and saying, oh, I want to have my own coven. A coven is like your own little group of people, right? It's like, I mean, you can call it a study group, or you can call it, but they wouldn't think of it that way. They think of it like, oh yes, this is like, our spiritual center, basically. And they'd have like, oh, here's my arch druid or whatever, right? Or it sounds kind of like D&D. And the thing is, D&D stuff can kind of cross over, it seems. And I grew up, my mom had friends who were into this stuff. So I kind of became acquainted with some of the lingo and some of the, like, just not the practices directly, but sort of like anecdotally, I would hear about stuff. And the problem with Wicca is like, they'll say, oh, we worship the goddess. This is the old religion. So if you look at Mists of Avalon, written by a pedophile, by the way, whose husband was also a pedophile, and whose daughter later exposed them. Like, Mists of Avalon became like, I mean, it was written a while ago, but I think it got much more fanfare, like around 99, 2000. They made like a TV movie based off of it. And they get into like the Wicca practice of like 2 guys, 1 girl, if you catch my drift. Where Lancelot and Arthur were both banging Guinevere because Arthur thought he was infertile, right? And our ancestors did this, and okay, yeah. Marion Zimmer Bradley was an absolute pervert, and so was her husband, and they literally had sex with their son together. So you got to understand, this is the very dark side of Wicca. Okay, Marion Zimmer Bradley was, I believe, at the founding of the SCA, which is also the same year that the Church of Satan came out, and people tried to make correlations. That's the really dark side of this, where it's like, oh, well, we don't follow Christianity, we follow the old religion, we follow the goddess. Okay, and so this is kind of the way they do things. And people I knew back like 25 years ago, 23 years, when I became friends with Killian, like people I knew back then that were kind of into goddessy type stuff, some of them have like gotten away from that. They were kind of dabbling with Wicca a little bit, and they're like, nah, I'm going to follow Jesus, like, and started living more normal lives. And I'm glad, because if you get rid of all conventional morality because, oh, that's all a Judeo-Christian tradition, and I'm Celtic, or whatever, right? Um, you have that whole thing, right? You have this. It's like, oh, well, then I don't have to be faithful to my husband because I'm a goddess and he is a god and we are, whatever, right? And this whole thing is going on where you become your own spiritual authority, you become your own deity essentially. And so my mom knew a woman who was, not totally sure if the daughter is the daughter of her husband, but the kind of claimed her. So maybe, I don't know. And they're still friends with the other dude and his wife, who's actually the younger sister of the woman in question. So I'm not giving out names. Okay. I'm not going to say what city. Okay. But this is the kind of stuff that has gone on. And I like these people. Don't get me wrong. Like, they've always been nice to me. They've always been nice to my mom. Like, but, and yeah, they love Renfair. And I've seen some of them at Pow Wows too. Right. So it's just like, but that whole thing is poisonous. Like, why would a dude want to let his wife bang some other dude and they all sleep in the same bed and all this? I mean, unless you're gay, right? And I'm pretty sure he's not. That's the thing. Like, I don't think he's bisexual. I don't think any of that. But I think he's like indoctrinated, brainwashed by this tradition that they've taken on, right? And there's some weird, evil stuff going on there. I have another friend who's much younger. She's younger than I am by a few years. And I think she was trying to, get her hands on me, if you catch my drift. Not going to say her name. She was in a polyamorous relationship with the guy she's married to, who claims to be the father of the kid, who claims that it is his kid, claims the kid has traits that are like him. And then the other dude, who is probably the real father of that kid. Okay. I can't say for sure because I've not seen a DNA test, but DNA tests exist now. We can figure these things out. Okay. And then she's been posting things on Facebook about being single. It's complicated. Things like that. Okay. The dude who might be the father of the kid, like, he got out of the relationship. He found another girlfriend. And then I think now he's become more conservative in his practices. And so that's what I'm saying, is that people that get into some of this other stuff often find their ways back out of it and back into the real normal Judeo-Christian world. Okay, hopefully. Now, here's the thing. Renfair is a very fun place to be. It's a fun place to just stay at forever and build your life around going to fair. People just have and you don't have to be a pagan to do that. Okay, like, you have Christians who do this for their entire lives, and but it's just a fun place to be. You can dress up in costumes, you can make arts and crafts, you can be a swordsman, you can make armor and all this other cool stuff. Okay, you can tell stories, you can do poetry, you can watch music being played, you can and listen to it, of course, and you can play instruments. So all this stuff exists for people to do and to start doing. Even if others aren't doing, you can bring that there, and then it just builds the tapestry of the event. It's fun. Like, you can get in touch with your ancestral roots. You don't have to get into some of this weird other stuff that people say is the ancestral roots, because it's not. Got to keep in mind too that Scotland hasn't been pagan since since St. Columba, right? You're going back to like St. Patrick himself, and then you see his successors left Ireland, went to convert the Picts and the Scots and all that stuff. And so, like, I would say for the last 1,200 years, for sure, like, Ireland, Scotland, Wales have been Christian nations, like, if not entirely Christian in the population at that point. So it doesn't mean that stories that have like mythologies that have pagan connection or Arthurian legends that might have originated in a slightly more paganish era didn't survive into the medieval era and get written down. Sure. Okay. By the way, I love Arthurian legends and romances. I always have. Okay. We discussed that a little bit last night as well in our conversation. It's good to have that kind of conversation with an old friend that, you know, we agree on some things, we disagree on some things. We're more in line politically. Yeah, it was good to have that conversation, even though it went on for a long time. At one point, I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna like start stitching this thing while she's talking. Like the last like 20-30 minutes of the conversation, that's what I was doing, because I'm like, man, like we've been on the phone for 2.5 hours already, and I've been to finish this thing. I was working on this when she called. So anyway, but no, you can build lifelong friendships with people, and you know, it's even when you're not going to the festivals anymore, you can still be like, yeah, I love that person. This is my friend, you know, and it's cool. But yeah, that's the thing. As far as the spiritual traditions, you got to be very careful, because there was no the Celtic religion. The Celtic religion never existed. The Druid tradition never existed. There's different Druid traditions. There's different Celtic religions. You have continental Celtic religions, like what the Gauls were practicing, and the Celtiberians and others, and their stuff may have been different from each other as well. You go to Britain, and the British Celts, the Brittonic people, they had their own version of Celtic gods. And then you go to Ireland, just across the Irish Sea, a hop, skip, and a jump away, if you're an Irish pirate, and you have a bunch of other Celtic gods. And the legends that have survived there may be some similar archetypes. Okay? Similar archetypes do exist within, like, for example, okay, like, you have the sword of Fergus MacRoy that was said to be two-handed and was so long it can cut off the tip of a mountain, and it was called Callabulg. Okay, I'm probably pronouncing it incorrectly, but Callabulg. Then you have in the British Welsh tradition, Arthur's Excalibur, which was called Callabulg. Okay, it's a very subtle difference, right? The way it's spelled is very similar. The way it sounds is probably kind of, yeah. I mean, I'm not perfect in my pronunciation of Welsh or Gaelic, or Gaelga, which is Irish, or Gaelic, which is Scottish. I'm better at Gaelic, but it's been many years since I even practiced any of that. Okay. But that's the thing. So, and you have to look at this too. Like, what about the modern culture? You can go back to the ancient culture, and the modern culture is maybe vastly different, or maybe more similar in other ways than what you're kind of reconstructing at the festivals. Okay. Or getting exposed to at the festivals. I mean, you go to a Highland Games, you're getting a part of Scottish heritage. You're not getting the entire thing, but you're also getting a part of what survives in modern Scottish heritage. But if you read books of what was happening like 300 years ago, 250 years ago, etc., like it's different than what they're doing today. And there's a lot of cool stuff you can like glean from that, especially if you're trying to kind of reenact or recreate what once was. Okay. And some people still have kind of a memory of these things, even if they're not being practiced currently. There's still been the survival of some traditions or memory of these traditions. And so, and every culture's got something cool about itself that others can gain from. And the whole arts and crafts things that I've done over the years, I mean, my mom told me something years ago, like 20 years ago almost. She's like, with all this time that you put into like the Scottish games and learning all this stuff, I mean, you could have been focusing on the Indian stuff. I realized that she's right. I could have learned a lot more about Muskogee heritage. I could have done, well, kind of, except that you go back 20 years, there wasn't much on the internet. I created Muskogee Creek Indians on MySpace. That was me. And some of those friends carried over to Facebook. I didn't recreate the group on Facebook because I don't think the groups existed yet when I joined Facebook. But Facebook existed, and there was like when Facebook got big, within a year, like no one was on MySpace anymore, hardly. So, I mean, MySpace actually still exists, but it's like, why at this point? So, anyway, stupid fly won't leave me alone here. So yeah, I mean, you're gonna have what some people call the traditions, and they'll even bring out old texts, or they'll bring out modern texts that quote old texts and try to say, oh yes, this is our thing, this is my grimoire, right? Which is basically a magical text. And even that's a pretty like modern thing. Like grimoires weren't a thing like 1,000 years ago, right? It's more like people in the last couple 100, 300 years were trying to become more in touch with, magical roots that started creating grimoires. Okay, so, I mean, yeah, it's interesting. But they're going to, oh, by the way, Yolo Morganog created some, he called it Celtic runes. There's not really any kind of historical basis for these. He probably was fabricating legends. Like there's evidence that he was, and the fact there's no evidence of the runes anywhere outside of his stuff is pretty indicative that he was actually forging some stuff. Okay, while saying, "Oh, I'm a scholar, I'm doing all this," and like even the Mabinogion is kind of tainted with some of his work. So be careful with that book. Some of it there's some real legends from actual texts, and then there's like some of the other stuff. I can't remember which legends are like influenced by his efforts and by his cohorts, but yeah. So you gotta be careful. You gotta always look at the origin of any primary source. You gotta look for the origin, the root of any primary source to understand where it comes from. And so to understand the legendary King Arthur's connection to a possible historical one, or maybe several different Arthurs that were within 100 years of each other, and then others who may not have been called Arthur, but whom the legend might be partly based off of. You guys see what I'm getting at? I mean, you got to be careful. You got to do your due diligence. But, otherwise, people tell you whatever they want you to believe, and or maybe they believe it, but they don't have all the correct information on these things. So next thing you know, Morgan Llewellyn's books on Brian Brewer are totally correct. And it's like, no, they're really not. Like, it's almost entirely fiction. Like the social interactions between all the characters, it's all made up by Morgan Llewellyn. Like, it's fiction. So be forewarned. Be careful about powwows, because you're not going to always learn about your own native heritage, and what you think you might be learning about some other tribe might also be tainted with modernism, like all of the two-spirit stuff going on that's being at times overly emphasized. There is no two-spirit tradition within the Muskogee heritage, and now it's made its way into modern Muskogee Nation mind. Okay, and my mom was told by her people, you don't talk about that to the kids. You don't want to corrupt them. You do that stuff, you do it privately. And my understanding from a guy that hit on me, who technically shouldn't belong to the ceremonial grounds that I'm supposed to belong to. Okay. Yeah. Some people know about him, some people don't. He likes both, just saying. And yeah, this dude was, he told me that a lot of the older people are not down with that stuff. With good reason, especially when someone is as aggressive, despite being married to a woman, is that aggressive at trying to get their hands on me. Okay, sorry, no thanks. Homie, don't play that. Okay. Yeah, anyway, so be careful about modernisms. You want to learn about the real traditional stuff, you gotta talk to people that actually know, and it's hard to find that. It can be hard to find that type of person who knows. Like, don't look at me and say, oh, James Satterley, he knows all the stuff about Muskogee heritage, and he must know the medicine tradition. I don't. I know about some things. I know about some traditions, but that doesn't mean that like I'm the arbiter of all things Muskogee, that I know everything. I don't. I know some of the language. I have a lot more to learn and to practice with my son so that he can build upon that the way that I built upon whatever my mom could have taught me. He can build more upon that. Okay. And hopefully, if I have any good information here on this channel, you guys, you gals, can take this and build upon it. That's really the purpose of this, is to keep a memory of what was and what is, and to give some type of foundation to hopefully build upon it more. So in the same sense, if you're a Renfair person and you're thinking about the old religions or the old religion, whatever, do some research, man, ma'am, whichever. There's only two genders, just saying. But yeah, and that's the thing. On that note, so the daughter that might not belong to the dad that I mentioned earlier, not from my younger friend, but from my mom's friends, she married a dude that later became tranny. And the dude that might be the real father, who married the sister of the woman he was sharing, right? He has a daughter whose boyfriend also went trans, and they're in the same coven. So let that sink in for a second, guys. Let that sink in, because it's not that necessarily Wicca has in the past originally led to that, but nowadays it is, because it's very liberal, doesn't adhere to Judeo-Christian values, and so it's much easier for weird crap like that to happen. It just is. I've seen it. So this isn't coming from nothing, okay? So anyway, do your due diligence. Find the best sources that you possibly can on anything you're looking up. And good luck out there. All right. But for watching, Hadam Chichatlis. Oh, and in Gallic, Bishin Gedekin. We'll speak again.